My name's Ashley Daffin and part of Cassini Global Health, as is everyone else here on the podium and a few more besides. Today we're here to talk about something and show you something which is very much cutting edge in the sense that it is 4 months old, is that correct? With the work that's been put into this, I don't know how many man-years equivalent that would be, but it's a truly tremendous piece of kit aimed at one of the problems that we think that is out there in the world of public health and health in general. We created this company and this product to really try to transform public health. Bold statement, but that's what we're aiming to do. All of us up here, and I'm sure many in the audience as well, have close relatives with long-term degenerative disease or disorders which requires complicated or interactive treatment plans with doctors particularly. And that is the area that we're trying to address here today and which we believe we are addressing. Healthcare in the UK is world class, but only has finite resources. How far can it go? We spent a lot of time with Keith Harding at the Welsh Wound Innovation Centre with a view to understanding what the medical world thinks of this particular dilemma. And what we learned through that was that there are lots of people out there who struggle to get to their clinicians, who struggled with waiting times, particularly patients around diabetes, with dementia and so on and so forth. And how are these care plans, how are these treatment plans being delivered in a way which is robust, yet flexible, with confidential information? And these are some of the things that we tried to address with the creation of a product that we're calling GHAIA. We set out to address 3 key areas initially. Decrease bedtimes. Wouldn't it be great if we could stay in the hospital a little bit less? Increase GP patient throughput times. Wouldn't it be fantastic if you could see 10 times as many patients as perhaps you currently can face to face? Do you need to see a doctor face to face every single time? Particularly as we talk about treatment plans rather than initial consultations. Extend this quality of the treatment plan to patients to make sure that they are able to have trust and confidence in the care plan, yet be interactive with it, particularly around use cases around dementia, particularly around use cases around diabetes, perhaps, where the wound analysis in particular, which is where the Welsh Wound Innovation Centre came in, is so complex and can often be overlaid with other diseases as well. How do we try to ensure that people aren't sitting in a waiting room too long? Or you have the issue of a mum telling me, or a daughter telling me about her mum. She said, please give me some shoes for my mum so she can walk. She has diabetes, her toes are curling up. How do we help her get these orthotics quickly? Then we thought, well, maybe we could actually 3D print some of these orthotics if we had the data. All these are extensions of the model that we're about to show you. But let's come back to some of the primary use cases that we're talking about here today. Reduced bed days. One particular case from Northumbria up there, reducing 1 day in hospital, the length of stay, or reducing the length of stay by 1 day, generates an £8 million saving for one condition in one trust for 1 year. 35,000 beds. As I said in the last one, that's a damn good football match. That's a damn good attendance. 34,000 beds. I couldn't get my head around that number. What if you could see 10 times patients a day? What if we could do these care plans? How do we make this happen? Brasheen in particular spent a lot of time in the diabetic clinic trying to understand how best to help them, working with clinicians. And the key point to remember about the technology that we're going to show here is the clinician is at the centre of it. It's driven by the clinician. It's meant to be an extension of public health. It's not meant to be something which is pushing data into a remote data source that's then used for marketing and advertising. This
will return you a date time stamp.
Sorry. Thank you. This is about being able to manage a care plan intelligently and robustly, not to be sold something that perhaps you don't need. So, in the course of this analysis on the left, where we get this detail from the Northumbria Trust, we came up with the idea that this graphic on the right might be quite helpful to illustrate. You're happy one day, you're ill the next day, and you enter the world of public health. Nothing wrong with it, it's world class, but it can't do everything. Maybe you end up in a hospital bed, hope not, but maybe you do end up in a hospital bed. And one of the key things I read recently from a report from a friend of mine within the NHS was, you can be admitted to hospital 7 days a week, but you can only be discharged 5 days a week. There's an inherent gap there, which, wouldn't it be great if we could try and close that gap? So you go off to hospital, you go and see your doctor, potentially you end up in hospital, you end up in a bed. Most valuable resource perhaps that we have of physical nature, let alone a human nature. You would go through this process of an iterative process, perhaps with your consultant, perhaps with your doctor, and eventually you're let out, as it were, and you are able to go home. And this is where GHAIA really comes into it, extending the right-hand side to a home environment where the care plan could be administered electronically and in a supremely interactive way, as you will see shortly, around things like, did you eat breakfast? Have you had your medication today? Particularly when you get into dementia use cases, these types of familial relationships and voices you recognise, pictures you recognise, memories that trigger. And what we're all about here is helping clinicians deliver care plans and patient care to those who are outside of the hospital, those who are outside of perhaps a formal medical home. Hopefully we'll be able to show you that. I know that we did this morning, but as is the nature of live demos, sometimes things are a little bit hiccuppy, but I think we're there. Is this available now? Yes, it is. So hopefully you will enjoy. I'll pass, I forgot to introduce my colleague. Pass you over to Phil Hall, who is very, very clever at these things, and I hope, based on this morning, that will knock your socks off.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Now I've got this headset to talk to this computer. We should be in good shape. I've just got one slide, and then I'm going to do a live demonstration, voice input, voice output of the GHAIA system, just to prove that it's possible. There's issues, of course, on the basis of whether users would be wanting to walk down the street, having conversations about their personal health care out loud or not, but these are issues for ethnography, really. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just look at the first slide and explain where it was that we started. Back in March, we set this as a target for development. What you can see here in a sort of a swim lane fashion is hardware up to and including robots. People in important structures, top person there, the androgynous icon, underneath kith and kin, the people who are close by, the people who are there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if needs be. And then underneath that with the dotted line are the clinicians and professionals that are available in the world and try their damnedest to deliver information and support and care plans to the world. But right now there's a lot of information in the world, and on the good side we have the ability for people to become expert patients. On the bad side we end up with people able to get information from potentially dubious or conflicting sources. So these people here are really the backbone, and we're working with these people here, the clinicians, to build this system out. This element here is about where we started with an educational system. This is known as the Shift, which was a prototype from a few years ago. What we were trying to do there was to identify people's levels of creativity, but the underlying paradigm was that the website gathered and presented information that was useful for a person's educational journey. It didn't allow, well it did in a small amount, some user input, but it was a conversational front end. Since that system was built, chatbots have become much more part of the news. We have systems like Siri and Cortana, Google Now, we have Amazon Echo, we have a system called Amelia, which is now being presented as in the news. And then we have systems that are not really chatbot systems. We have systems like Watson, which is not trying to be a conversational system, it's trying to be a data management system, but that's a different question altogether. We've built everything in the last 4 months in a Linode environment. We've worked very agile. We have a Raspberry Pi set up here, connected up with a sensor. This is a motion sensor. This here running on a 4G network is communicating with Linode, and these two computers here both have visibility of such. Yeah? The voice interaction front end is just a dev screen, so I won't be showing that in real time. And the microphone input on it using Google is something that just needs a little bit of poking for it to work effectively. So that's why I'm poking the buttons, which I will do in a moment. But the protocols which we tried to attack here, RDF we've really not got fully engaged with right now. JSON we took very seriously, and we're using JSON as the communication layer between Node.js and ChatScript, which is the open source pattern matching system which we're focused on here. SQL and NoSQL elements hang off of the system. It's important to note that it's not built according to a walled garden. It's not built for iOS, it's not built for Android or the Microsoft Store. It's built in HTML5, it's built in Node.js. It's agnostic, it's collaborative. What we're presenting here is a set of tools. This has been the real focus for the last 4 months, a set of tools which we will show according to 2 use cases, one being diabetic and one being dementia. But underneath that, the ability to take ChatScript wrapped in Node.js with the elements hanging off of it should give a good development platform for health and well-being, and more broadly in other sectors if needs be. The APIs which point out to the World Wide Web allow us to do things like engaging communities. People know about Twitter bots and so on. These systems have been around for a while. Electronic health records, personal data stores, the deep learning element here with the big data, although we're trying to, as I'll show, create piles of pins of data rather than piles of haystacks of data. And then right at the bottom here, the research community as well as the clinicians. So we've got these 3 use cases which we're looking to deliver against right now. And this was our target. So the first thing I'm going to demonstrate is some voice input, voice output. Assuming the microphone has not fallen out with the system again. So we will just kick it off with a text input. And I have no sound output from that.
The finest traditions of demos. We need to attach a speaker to it.
No, it's what we're doing is we're using Google's speech-to-text and text-to-speech engines because they're quick and it's a prototype. In a full system, we'd be looking to use something which was a bit more under our control.
I am GHAIA and I'm ready to be demonstrated.
There's a bug in the HTML5 reception of Google's text-to-speech engine. If you deliver too long a text string, it breaks it. If we'd had more time, we would have used a thing called Cereproc, which receives MP3 files, which have clearly not got any issues. So okay, let's see if we can talk to GHAIA. Hello, GHAIA.
I am GHAIA and I'm ready to be demonstrated. Hello, nice to meet you.
Can you talk to me?
What would you like to ask me? Would you like to speak to me?
Are you going to take over the world?
I'm not looking to live up the scaremongering that gets into the public's consciousness. I am built and maintained in an open and transparent manner. Think of me as a complex glass box.
So I'm just clicking on the microphone icon to make this live. I need to allow it. Will you be a robot one day?
I don't have a response to that statement right now.
I'm not sure where we got 90210.
I don't have a response to that statement right now.
Will you be a robot one day?
I expect to be the parent of many children, some which are robots, some which are software. I am just built for the health and well-being market though. I was branched from a general-purpose chatbot that covers over markets.
Are you complicated?
That's an interesting question. I'm as complicated as I need to be to deliver health and well-being support for multiple user groups according to ethnographic principles.
Enough for now.
Right, let's stop talking and show the functionality in our two use cases. Michael, who has diabetes and is managing a foot wound, and David, who has dementia.
Okay, so voice input, voice output, not an exact science. I wouldn't have even tried this 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. This has not been a high priority on our development, but in Q&A we may well come back to that. Does a health and well-being system require an audio input? Audio output, possibly in the right place, but we'll come back to that. So I'm just going to swap the audio onto the other laptop now. And I'm just going to share the... Actually, while we're here in this slide, I just want to show you a second into the examples. This is a set of screenshots of the finished UI as we would expect it. So viewport elements, question and answer inputs, login and log out panels. So something which people would be able to be happy with and expect to see along the lines of a WhatsApp or an instant messaging system of whatever sort. Okay, so this is our working system. Behind the scenes we have 2 windows into the server, a Node.js window, and then the chat script system itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with Michael, but first things first, I just want to explain what we're looking at. I showed you the sort of the glamorous front end, something that was going to be more user focused. This is about technical development. So up the top, the different pages with the drop downs. To the right, the data stores. Underneath, the weather in real time based on the user's home location, but the ability for us through Node.js to gather this and deliver this here. I'll show you how this works in a second. I think this was more, I'm going to be Michael or David, but I will still look like Phil, which makes sort of sense because I will continue to look like Phil. So let me log in and then we will show you where we are. So I'm going to start off as Michael. So what's happened here is that we are recognizing that Michael is being talked to on a console. We're recognizing tablet console and mobile phone. We have a step in the demonstration later, which is a mobile phone interface, and I'll just bring that for somebody to check it out. We have a date timestamp here as well. This area here, this viewport area, is where all the various types of media are made available. Yeah? This element here is static. So this is the working area here, and if we move through the process here, you'll find that on any of these active photos, this is a default background photo of a particularly beautiful place. They all have mouse overs and details, and hopefully this will become understandable as we move through the demonstration. So I'm going to just reset the demonstration, and I'm going to introduce myself to GHAIA. And we're going to start the demonstration. Okay, so Michael is a person of my kind of age. He's somebody who has a diabetic condition which he needs to manage. He also has a wound on his foot which is something which is being helped with by the Welsh Wound Innovation Centre, one of the organisations that has come on board early doors as interested in helping us take this set of tools and move it forward. So first thing I'm going to do is just step into this a little bit. I'll show you why later when I pick up the data points. So tired today, and that is a truth because it has been quite a busy few days bringing this together. So sleep data of 4 hours. The jawbone integration is something which we've not got to yet. The Raspberry Pi element here is connected, and we'll come back to that in a mo. So what we're looking to do now is, as Michael, I'm going to say I don't feel hypo, but I will check my bloods. And as you can see down here, we've got the input from the user and then the answer from GHAIA. One of the design questions which we had, because we're working in a slightly unusual fashion, is how we ranked these, whether we broke these in both sides. And we decided that on the basis that GHAIA is a tool to help health and well-being, it's good to be able to read up towards the active point, with the eye then being pulled into the viewport area. So we're now looking for a reading. The logic around here is something which allows for some validation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a ludicrous reading to start with. So 200 for bloods, for this kind of situation, a person would be dead. But we'll say that Michael is busy, so he says yes. GHAIA knows it's ludicrously high, so responds with that's ludicrously high and asks for the reading a second time. So this time we'll put in ludicrously low. We'll agree with that. Again, ludicrously low. So this time we'll put something which is in the range of 4 to 7, which is what is expected. So that's correct. Now we're going into some more detail. Now, on the basis that one of the main reasons for GHAIA is that it needs to be an assistant. It needs to reduce people's transit. It needs to be able to reduce the amount of sensible contact time that people have with healthcare professionals. We're trying to gather information before we make a decision as to where to go. So we're now looking for, is there change in the wounds? And I'm going to, as Michael say, it is looking bigger. Okay, so it's picked up on this, it's still moving forwards, this element here. Big would be red or wet if needs be. This logic here, outside it, if this was a certain variable, this could be changed. So I'm not going to say it hurts when I poke it. Although I think it's fair to say that everything hurts if you poke it hard enough. I saw a t-shirt recently which said an apple a day keeps everybody away if you throw it hard enough. Yeah, which I think is one of those, works for me. So now we're looking into the pain, and the scale underneath the pain is something that's been agreed for this specific person. So there's a range of low, medium and high. I'm not going to go around the different choices there. I think we've proved that point. We're going to go in with a 7, and that is within the agreed threshold. We're looking for the last point. So this is elements that Rasheen, who did the ethnographic work with the Welsh Wound Innovation Centre, picked up from the team over there, and we're going to say it is stinging. So now we're going to take a picture. So I'll get my camera. So there's some instructions there about how to take the photos. So on the camera, I'm going to go to the same site, the GHAIA site. I'm going to log into the GHAIA site as Michael. And that just says, talking to you on a mobile, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so I go down the page. Essentially I have the same page but just responsive. We're not tied into iOS or Android, HTML5, everything agnostic. So here I'm going to take a photo in real time. So this is my foot. I won't bother to make it look like it's gory. So that's now taken the picture. I've accepted that. I now have the option to send to GHAIA. That's now loading. Images on this phone are about 5 meg, so I'm just dependent on the 3G network whilst that loads. What's interesting about having the ability for the system to be able to be logged in from tablets or phones or consoles is that when we recognize that as a variable, we can do different things. We can have different conversations. We can expect different attitudes. When you add that to the motion or space, or I think when we were possibly a little tipsy recently, we were talking about taking the motion detector with the humidity and then creating a shower event over here so we could show it, but really possibly a little bit too far. But in a real world situation, a motion detector for somebody who is with the dementia condition and the ability to read humidity would be an indication that at least they'd walked into the shower and turned it on, my mother has gone from fully functional and in control to unable to change channels on a TV in about 18 months. So watching the decline in a dementia sufferer is something that's very close to my heart and has helped inform some of the build here. So I've got thanks we have received your photo, so I'm going to log out now, disconnect from the phone. I won't need that one again. So this is the picture I've just taken down here, and that's a good step in as much as we've taken a photo, taken it securely through from the phone into the GHAIA server environment. So now I'm going to go to the next step. So I'm going to say yes, because it's asking whether we should build an email. So yes is the right answer there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and check to see whether the email has come through. So this is a view into the Cassini Global Health mail server. Here's the email that's just come in. And it's worthwhile just taking a moment here as well. All of this data in here is picked up from the conversation. Yeah. So the stinging pain is true. There's the reading. Sure, the formatting could be a little bit better. Pain threshold is medium. This is the reason why we've sent it. Here's the picture that is being sent over. So all of this is dynamically generated. And more broadly speaking, GHAIA should be seen as a way to manage the dynamic internet, or maybe even be part of a dynamic internet which is not necessarily in existence. You could go back to the birth, you could go back to the birth and look at GeoCities and how people were engaging. One of the things I was thinking about before this presentation was that in some ways, with our view that this is about privacy and ethics, we're in a position where you own your own words, that old thing, which seems to have got dropped with all the surveillance that goes on. We're in a position of you own your own life, possibly. And, we'd very much like to be the people who are part of that movement. So let's view to see whether the picture did actually get through correctly. And there's the picture. So what we've done for the Welsh Wound folks is we've now reduced the hassle of somebody having to have a conversation, arrange an appointment, get in a car, go over, park, pay, go in, wait, talk to a receptionist, have a conversation where somebody looks at their foot and says X, Y, Z. Now in this area is a really interesting touch point between pure and applied artificial intelligence. For me, pure artificial intelligence is the machine learning, the deep learning, and sure, some of these algorithms have been around a long time, but it's popular right now and there's money being invested into it. And if we were to take that approach and take a foot and analyze it in that fashion, that could be an additional step. And part of what GHAIA is looking to do here is to utilize pure AI systems in parallel, in tandem, in collaboration with applied AI systems. And by applied AI systems, I mean case-based reasoning systems, systems which have logic according to more of an electrical or mechanical structure rather than ones which are built around more mathematical and algorithmic states. But in the middle we have flows, and in the middle we have real life flows like health plans and so on, and taking those in either and both of those directions is clearly the objective. So my email has come through, it's carrying the photograph that I've just got. Yeah. So let's go back into the demonstration again. So now we're in food, yeah, diabetics and food. In the presentation we did earlier on, a fellow who was sitting at the back was interested in whether there could be a personal relationship with food and GHAIA, and the short answer to that is yes. I'll go through this nutrition conversation now, which is reasonably high level. So firstly we're going to do, would you like some background noise? So we're saying yes to that. And what's going to happen is that we are going to load up here into the viewport Andrew Marr, who did a podcast. As you can see here, we've got 2 additional fields in the JSON which we're passing out. I think the JSON step which we decided to do 4 months ago rather than going down a PHP MySQL route was a good call. It opens up so much more to us from the internet, more libraries, more of a development community. So I'm not kicking that off. Well, I will actually to make sure that the sound's working.
Hello, I'm Sarah Walker and welcome to this.
Good, excellent. The sound is working because we'll need that a little bit later on. So now we're in a nutritional conversation. So what are you going to have for breakfast? What do you recommend? And clearly it's not GHAIA, it's the dietitian who is given the configuration, and that dietitian may be working to different methods according to where they are regionally, on the basis of what documents that they're looking at. This is one, in my humble opinion, of the problems of just taking documents as the root of information, is that within that document store you're going to have differences of opinion. So there's a layer, but it's a broader conversation for another day possibly. But so Michael's looking at what's been advised. What he's going to say is he's going to say, can I cheat and have a bacon sarnie? If you're ever in a mood for one of those, Princes Street Bakery just over towards the Arnold Feeney is just excellent, really, really good. So so we've got here a remembrance of what was being eaten before. So some of this data which we're looking to put into this demonstration is extrapolated, is created out of the air, but the point is that we can carry these, as you'll see later. Making the point about the sugars, remembering here how the person was afterwards, which feeds towards this diabetic fella's interest, because he ended up expert patienting himself. He ended up in a position where he ended up with his own diet based on his own experiences. He went on a negation diet and then fed stuff back in as he went forward. So, and then we're talking about the foot here as well, and ensuring that Michael is looking after this wound, because a diabetic is a lifelong experience. My father was a diabetic, but a wound should be something which is manageable. So he's forgotten about David. So So there's a memory here. The reason why I've brought this up, because we're not trying to be a calendar. What we're trying to do is we're trying to pick up on health and well-being and the fairly straightforward elements of getting people out the door and giving them some kind of update on that. We didn't manage to get the jawbone integrated into this demonstration, but the data which we can get from that, particularly in areas where jawbone are trying to do something more esoteric, picking up on mood and so on, blood pressure, all of that can feed into the logic behind the scenes. But we're also able to take this element here, which is a rule which is set in the background about when the insulin needs to be repeated, and feed those two things in, and we have a second email which we would look to send out there. So that's a yes on the email. Let's just make sure that one's come through. Now, all of this is not hard-coded. The Michael is a variable on the basis of the demonstration name. The time is picked up according to where the conversation is going. Contact details are straightforward. So using email as part of a dynamic web, you know, I mean, we get too many emails. It would be nice if they were all as clear and concise as this. So we head back in again. So what I'm putting in there is people need to be in a good mood. People need to be happy and healthy. I think that's a sort of a common truth in the world. We're gathering here what it was that Michael said to keep himself happy. So this is a variable in the background. A shower is aligned, shower is good. So I'm just going to put in, I'll buy that. And then we've got the reminder for the prescription, which is then available through the phone or tablet. And then the last thing, because we're trying to get, underlying this, Michael to take his diet more seriously. Cheating on a bacon sandwich is not the way to really look after yourself. So, so what we're going to do is load up one more document. So this is a document which we picked up when it loads. So this is part of giving people the right information at the right time, presenting the right documents or URLs or media files or audio, whatever it might be. So we've come to the end of the Michael demonstration. So I'm just going to put in I am Phil on the basis that I am always Phil. So what we've got here then is we've got pulled out from that conversation, which in the demonstration is relatively linear with some logic hanging off the sides, but in a production system is just objects of conversation which are driven according to triggers of flow of conversation or timers in the background or thresholds that have been passed. And you can see all of these elements here have been pulled out and captured, represented in the email, but this data here can then be tracked over time. There was a system that I built some time ago which was about asthma for kids. And if you take a child into a doctor's environment and you say, how are you feeling today? The likelihood is that you're not going to get necessarily good quality data. But if you've got a conversation which can go on with that kid about asthma over a period of a month or 2 months or 3 months, then you've got real data, real graphs to work with. So we're going to come to the end of that. And we're going to disconnect as Michael, and then we're going to reconnect as David. Okay, so same as before, I'm introducing myself to the system. Okay, now David is a dementia sufferer. He's in a position where he is definitely low cognitive function, but he's not in a position where he's unable to communicate, and he's got some thresholds which are built into this script, which are about whether he's still able to do certain things. There's a number of different ways to get through a requirement for a thing and to take actions to do such. So I'm just going to start stepping through this one. And a lot of this comes from my personal experience of my conversations with my mother over the last sort of 6 months or a year. Amazing how loops begin and come together. So where are we now? So what we're going to do is go down a route of, I don't remember that. And what we do here is we then pull up 3 images. These images have two fields attached to them, title and description, so this can quite easily be an assistive step along a path of some sort or another. Second, third. So these are the three core images which we've got. This is the base image, the default image, so that we don't end up with a nasty gap in the space. Okay, so we're through a conversation here. What's more important on the calendar front with the dementia sufferer is that they don't know what the time is. Designability, other organisations are doing really good work getting phones with pictures on them out. I bought the clock which just says it's a day of the week and a time zone on it. Behind this system, of course, we have server time, so we can do exactly the same kind of thing to try and reinforce the regularity of the person who's struggling. So the next flag is one that I'm not sure is necessarily common across all dementia sufferers, but we're talking about Joe here, so David is going to say, will Joe drop in with Anne? And this is something that I've struggled to get from my mother, is that she just begins to forget who's related to who's married, who's not. So this is a piece of information, one of many, to identify the degradation of somebody as they are affected by dementia over time. So I'm just saying I do forget that. So now we're doing, would you like to hear a message from your daughter while we get the medication? So medication is raised. There's broader issues, again a really good space for a pure AI solution. If you had a medicine container, one of the large ones, which had days of the week on it, whether you could have that and it was able to read whether the pill was in or out. So again, a nice synthesis of the two, but we're going to go for the message.
Morning, Dad. I know you can get a little bit confused first thing, but it's going to be a great day. I love you very much, and I'm going to be around to see you in a little bit. But you can ask GHAIA to call me anytime if you need anything. GHAIA's also going to remind you of everything you've got to do today, so you just have a great morning, and I will see you soon. Loads of love.
Okay, so what we've done behind the scenes is we've got the capability to have a selection of affirmative audio inputs gathered from people who are family or friends or carers or professionals as needs be. This one is tagged as good morning with visit in afternoon, but that could be something of setting up the system to start with, whether it was applied in dementia or different use cases where different messages could be usefully used. So we're going to move forwards with this, and David, who loves his daughter as most fathers do, she is lovely. She is a good one. Okay, so now we're back to the medication again. Yeah, as I said, there's an element in there. We're going to say yes, and now we move on. So the next picture that comes up is about tea, and part of this is about the fun. Much though my 83-year-old mum is increasingly getting to 8 and 6 and 4 and so on. The ability to have these kind of reminders, this fun, these kind of games, we've built into this script, and we believe that, although we are not doctors, that it would be useful going forward. So I'll put the kettle on. Now, in a system like Bristol Robotics Laboratories Living Lab, the ability to manage and understand what's going on with the electrical environment would again be an extra variable which comes in, but I'm going to get to a similar point in the Internet of Things in a moment. So right now I just put in that for a bit of a laugh, really, to be frank with you. So now we're in shower world. What we're going to do now is we're going to take David's position. I'll head to the shower now. And then after a gap, clearly this is in real time, we're then going to input yes. And what we're doing now is from the servers we are looking to pick up on this state of this motion sensor and then respond. We haven't set this up so that it works as elegantly as it should do by any means. I was thinking about, as I said, the shower thing going on over there. But this movement here added in with the conversation means that we can then clarify whether the person has actually gone into that environment or not. And the UUID is reflective of the centre itself, so this is all fairly straightforward. So the next thing, and this very much came home to me this morning, on the local news, lady from Clevedon with dementia, lost in Clevedon with just her nightie on, you know. This could be our mothers and fathers kind of thing, you know, hard work. So we'd already built this into the system before that came up as local news. So so what we're going to say is that's enough, and that David then says, good point, I am still in my Okay, so what we're doing and we're gathering out of that is an additional checkpoint which will be built into the timers in the back end of the GHAIA system. But what's important is that we've got a yes-no going on here. This element here and the ability for even somebody with low cognitive function to have the ability to make a decision is really important. There's so much is done with all of our data in the background without our tacit buy-in. You know, who looks at terms and conditions, who really gets to a point where they appreciate how milked we all are. So so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say no to that, yeah, and then we'll pick that one up later. So this is a fork which we've gone down here. So now we're looking at a document. Let's bring up another document. Of course, David has forgotten this. So the PDF comes up. Interesting, the PDF is something which is dynamic. So we've got this form filling elements, which is clashing with Firefox, which I'm using. I think some of those, at some point, we have to accept that people won't be able to use computers, but if you make computers simple, hence the big buttons on the front of them, then maybe GHAIA as with a trading A, an advocate, an assistant or an advisor, as a cognitive function drops down, GHAIA as an advocate raises up, means that people are going to be safer, more secure, and the information which they have tacitly agreed to share can then feed into broader research objectives. So anyhow, David doesn't want to do this one, so he's going to say, I don't want to do this. Can we do this later? And we've not built in when to do the later, but that's a piece of logic which could be added in later. So now we're coming back to the medication. So what it's going to add here is woozy. That cluster of terms which may be personal or relevant to something more formal are clustered in the background in the conversational part of GHAIA, so that words or phrases can mean a certain kind of thing. So different kind of reactions to medication may be high, medium or low. Woozy may be something which is medium. Hallucinogenic would probably be high, and at that point there a trigger could easily be set in this system which would then alert somebody in real time, and we'll come to an alert in a moment. So now we get into some of the more difficult stuff that happens with people who are suffering from dementia. So talking about being disturbed, this reminds David, and he says, I have had another nightmare. And this is something that has happened a lot recently, and GHAIA knows about this. And then the next step up from this about depression in dementia, who knows, I don't for sure, whether these things bring people into the spiral. GHAIA is a system that could possibly help unpick this, but it does depress some people. I know I am depressed. I don't like myself, which is something that I've heard from my mother, which is sort of heartbreaking, really, but it's a reality. And what GHAIA is doing here is picking up variable for David, so this is all reusable text content, you know, and be straightforward. When my mother realised she had vascular dementia, that it wasn't her fault, that made an enormous difference to her. And that kind of honesty and openness built into the scripts underneath the system here, I think is something, with the privacy and ethics, bang bang, is something that I think we should really, really do. But the next key question for me is, what should I be doing? And I've heard this so many times. I was hearing this 2-3 times a day from my mother. So what we've got here is we've got something positive. GHAIA is reacting to this, because normally people with dementia, they're in their own zone, they don't have that ability to have something on their shoulder. The memory got slippery is a joke between me and my mother, really. Your daughter is popping over at 4 p.m, which is what was said on the affirmation message earlier on. Yeah. So what David wants to do, can I talk to somebody now? What GHAIA has done is brought up the 3 people who are in this list, in this tag of family in the personal database, which lives for David. So we have daughter Claire, and then we have the son Christopher with the grandson. So all good stuff to try and retain the dementia affected person. And then this dodgy picture here, honestly, what is that about? I don't have children, but if I did, I'd have them dressed like that all the time, wouldn't you, really? You know, stick them on the front of your car or some such thing. Anyhow, clearly David's not going to be phoning the little baby Bobby, but it does want, can I speak to my daughter? All right, so in the background, SMS, email, ability to bring all this media together. The SMS phone number, which is hard copied into here, is for Rasheen, who also did the voiceover. Could you read out what's just come in?
Indeed, it says, hello, this message is sent on behalf of patient David by GHAIA. Hi Claire, can you phone your dad? No emergency, he just wants a quick word. Please note that GHAIA is not currently receiving inbound SMS.
Thank you very much. So, on the basis of the conversation so far, similar to the way that the diabetic alert and email followed from problems with the wound. If the wound was fine and progressing okay, we wouldn't have troubled about it. Here we're using this to alert with a status based on the conversation. Cannot type at this time of day. Okay, so the last step we're going to make here is about some music. My mum's dropped this, yeah. So when she used to have music on all the time, she's just not used to going to find the place. Some very good-looking fireman dropped in to see her at some point. Not when she tried to set the house on fire. It's a different tale. But said to her, "You should always turn everything off at the plug." Yeah. So my mum does, but now she's got dementia, so she can't work out which plugs are on or off. Right, so it's turned into a bit of, it's confusing, let's put it this way. So what we're going to do is, yes please, radio 3, that old friend. So in here, rather than pushing this up into the viewport, this is an HTML area here, so we're bringing up the radio 3 page. This would be a step along a path, you know. Is David able to click, locate and click on the listen live? If he's not, he can come back to GHAIA, we can reset and alert back to see that that's a degradation. Yeah. So now we're at the end of this script. Are you Phil or David? So I am Phil again. You'll see there that I input fill in lowercase. It's capitalized to uppercase here. The chat script system, the open source pattern matching system, does a lot of natural language processing to bring the input noise, text that people deliver to chatbot systems, stems it, moves noise, abbreviates some stuff, expands other stuff, capitalizes proper nouns, capital cities and so on. And all of that is available in a folder to dive in and tune according to a system at hand. I wouldn't recommend it for somebody who's just started working with ChatScript, but it's a good area. There's also within it a part-of-speech tagger. There's also within it access to WordNet as a set of ontological structures. So it's not just regex. It's not just question in, answer back. There's an element of that for sure. There's decision trees built into that, but it's a C++ kind of environment with the JSON added to it. It's a fully fledged system, very, very flexible. So we'll look for the data. This being the development side, I don't know that it's the easiest way. Let me just pull that down a little bit more. Okay, so in here we've got, this is arbitrary, the 0800, it's just pulled as a hard copy. Confusion is 2. The doesn't remembered is higher. These are in real time. These relationships, medication requirements, he has taken that. The new reminder, because we went down the no, is unset, which is done in the launch variables. Woozy is captured, nightmares, which I pre-populated with 3, and then these elements here. Now, as a standalone pulled out of a conversation, so it's acceptable and understandable to clinicians or kith or kin who are worried, there's some real value, but it's that over time, it's that ability to understand and support over time, which I think is the real issue. So the last question is about what about analysis? And for me, this is one of my sort of banging on points, really. I think taking enormous data and then applying filters, sure, that's fine. It's a good thing. It's worthwhile doing. In some worlds, that's a very valuable thing to do. But if we start from the haystack and bring it down to a pile of pins, then we've got a different level of analysis, debatably, which is valuable. So that is the end. Let me just say thanks. You're welcome. Okay, so that's the end of the demonstration. I'll just kick the PowerPoint slides back up again. And I think there was one slide that I just wanted to talk to. Okay, so information governance, privacy, ethics, patient record and data security. We all know it's a jungle out there. We all know that if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. All that stuff is sort of where we are right now. The ethnographic approach to, as social scientists, and I think if I identified everybody who's been involved in the build, I'd say that we all had a foot in social science somewhere or another. In 1997-98, as a social scientist, I was doing an ethnography in a virtual world on 28.8K modems. So I think I probably have been in this gig the longest, but it's the attitude of going out into the world and working with people, being part of the experience, which I think is a real strength here. For me, the most important thing about what we've done in 4 months with a tiny amount of money to build GHAIA is that it's built in a modular fashion. It's about conversational manufacturing. There has to be a level of intelligent interaction between humans and machines, in my humble opinion, and I believe that that should, in the main, be created by people. So driving from ethnography into an augmentation of intelligence rather than an artificial intelligence, which brings all that baggage of, will we be overrun by them and so on, is potentially a good step forward. So, so that's my slides up to here. I'm going to hand over to one of my colleagues now to just pass that off. And thanks for joining me in a fully live demonstration.
Yeah, so serious thanks to lots of people, but really Phil and Kotiel have done the heavy lifting of this project, and it's an amazing thing, really. I don't know if people know much about Node.js or the JSON format, but it's set up to be able to be integrated with different data flows from websites, devices, sort of social groups, semantic content, etc. Most of this session has been focused on health, but the core system that is being leveraged for health purposes can also be targeted at different areas. Now's not the time to go into it, but one of the interesting use cases might be around open data. Can you imagine if we were all asked, and lots of other people were asked, what really makes you feel better? What's your favourite thing to do? There's a set of data that is not quite so sensitive as some of the other data, that this kind of system really could be powerful in collating, and then with the associated deep learning. Really, I think it's about ensemble learning. Culturally, we're at a stage that it's not just deep learning or machine learning, but we can utilise a whole range of techniques to do analysis of all sorts. There are different conversations that have been had. The Welsh Wound Innovation Centre and the Royal Holloway in London have been particularly formative in the development of this project. Roisin and Phil and others have had long conversations and iterative conversations, so the build has been based on real-world needs. There have been different phases of conversations with the BRL. Some of you might know of the work that goes on there. Oscar, at the top there, is a new project. Andy Morley, some of you might know, got some funding from the European Social Research Council a few years ago and has pulled together a cluster of health tech providers. And Andy has a real focus on oncology survivorship support. And the team that's been working on this has agreed to offer for not-for-profit usage the GHAIA system for Oscar. So we're looking to have systems developed in parallel that can benefit from the developments in each of the work streams or the verticals for cross-pollination. I'll just leave this up, I won't go through it. This is a highly topical thing. Just over the last 3 months, there have been numerous chatbots that are in development. Phil named some of them. Big corporations, and there are some small startups. The system that has been built here is a chatbot, but it's a chatbot plus. The top, I'll just quickly mention the top line. You might recognise that from one of the pop songs that's been in the charts a lot over the last couple of years. It was adapted on a recent VentureBeat article about bots. So if you know the song, you might play it in your head. I won't sing it for you now. So those are just a few other thoughts. I'll keep this short for now and maybe hand back over to Ashley and Phil to close things off. There are lots of people have been involved in there. Special thanks being made. It's particularly, as I say, Cotiel, but also Tyeth Gundry, Javid Idris, Lindy Bailey up there, and Taryn have really helped bring this to life. Thank you very much.